Okay, so we want to welcome you to another great episode of the Life Optimized podcast. I am Dr. Neil Paulvin, where we talk about how you can optimize your health, your life, your mindset, and athletics. So we have a great guest with us today. I'm going to let her describe her many facets. I think that could take up half the episode by itself. So I'm glad to welcome on here Katrine.
Walensky.
Volinsky. That's
Walensky.
what. So you
Very Eastern
have
European.
very Eastern European. So
Mhm.
I mean, you are definitely a multi hyphenate, involved in many different things. It started from your teenage years to now. So explain to everybody your background, and we'll kind of go through how it got where you are today.
Okay, sure. So I'm a health practitioner and an author and researcher. And like you said, I wear many, many hats in the wellness industry. I've been in the wellness industry for over 20 years in lots of capacities, from formulating supplements to coaching to owning a clinic, running retreats, doing research. So lots of hats worn, like you said, and many paws in many pies, but it's all kind of a life path. And I really love what I do. So, the my path to health started, of course, with a personal transformation. Just for as many to go so deep, you either have to grow up in this or really love, like from the beginning, this kind of medicine wellness aspects, or you have to get really sick. So in my case, it was getting really sick. So I was born in Soviet Union, and my family was a family of engineers, specifically nuclear engineers, and they have traveled to all sorts of nuclear sites and worked on lots of different energy projects. And in 1986, I ended up being in Chernobyl, which of course was a site of nuclear explosion, which set me up for a lifetime of different illnesses and radiation-related issues. So by the time I was in my teens, I've gotten really, really unwell, and especially when the hormones kicked in. At 17, I had clinical death and experienced a lot of trauma around just, feeling like a lab rat, trying constantly to solve the issues. At that point, I was put on a bunch of experimental drugs and hormones, and it kind of stopped my problems at the moment. And I went on living like a very fast-paced life in Canada that included doing a double major, working in the banking industry, really not taking care of my body and not knowing how to take care of my body, not knowing that nobody actually gotten rid of like the underlying issues. And by the time I was in my 22, 23, going into grad school, I got sick again. And at that point, it was just, there was no solutions, and the medical community basically gave me a kind of terminal verdict. And at that point, I decided I was just going to take matters into my own hands and just find some solutions for myself. Spent several years detoxing on the couch, tried all sorts of different things. That's probably how I got into so many things, because literally anything that was coming my way, anything that I've heard about, I would just go and try it because there was just no other choice. And a lot of times it was one step forward, 20 steps back. Eventually, I had gotten to a place where I became very stable and healthy. And that started my passion for health. I realized that all I wanted to do was to learn more and to understand why certain things work, why certain things didn't. People started asking me how I got well. And that turned into a profession that was just fueled by just a lot of interest and personal growth, and just continues being so, because even though I'm much better where I was, it's still, it's still a project, especially being a woman and going through, hormonal changes and things like that. A lot of chefs kind of constantly have to stay on top of things and learn more on how to stay stable and healthy and have better life quality, basically.
And like you said, that's how many people get into the in terms of the supplements and detox, because they have a either personal or family story that's kind of led them in the path. And traditional medicine, I know throughout the world, is kind of not, it's not really equipped to handle that. They're good to help you when you're sick and do traditional medicines to kind of put some band-aids on, but never really get to the deep cause. And that's sometimes where you need to kind of, unfortunately, kind of do your own treatments, which it sounds like you did. And like you said, it taught you a lot. So when people do ask you, is there one or two things that are in terms of having when you're exposed to some severe toxicity that you would recommend that anybody can look into? Is it sauna? Is it a certain type of supplement? Is it a diet? Is it kind of all of the above? Is it just so individual that you really are there binders? What can people start? I mean, and kind of look into if they have been exposed to some type of toxin.
Well, I guess it's what kind of toxin it is, it right? And what person? It is individual. I do like that you mentioned sauna. I find that that's like after in your house, if you are able to, after you've taken care of the water, making sure that you drink clean water and air. That's my next step. Getting a sauna in the house, honestly, because it's just nowadays you're just exposed to things all the time, whether you've been exposed to a severe toxin like myself, radioactive particles, or you just living regular life, or maybe you're a hairdresser and your other occupations where you're exposed to a lot of chemicals and heavy metals. It's just here, and I don't like to, overly focus on all the evils that are out there and all the environmental issues. It's like, okay, how are we going to get out of this, and how are we going to support our daily lifestyle with detoxification processes that are just natural and help you live a better life anyway. So sauna is definitely a yes for me. It's one thing that, like I do several times a week, sometimes every day. It just depends on my schedule. There's so many different ones that are out on the market now. You don't have to have space, to have like a traditional or infrared sauna that, houses 1 or 2 people. You can get a sauna blanket. You can get one of the collapsible saunas. There's lots of choices nowadays that we didn't have, in like 20 years ago when I was healing. So we actually are in a times where we have a lot of resources. You just sometimes need a little help sifting through some of these things to figure out what is important. So sauna is for sure the yes for me. As far as binders goes, I do love binders, and different binders for different situations and different sensitivities. As in, some people are just very sensitive, and you have to be very slow with different binders with them. So you have to kind of figure it out and work with a professional who can help you with that. And anything from combination of charcoals and zeolites and some of the clays, like Quicksilver, for example, is one of my favorite brands. The Universal Binder, I love that stuff. Cellcore has an amazing line of binders. They have different binders for heavy metals, for biotoxins. I use them quite a bit personally and with clients as well. That's definitely one of the lines that I love. And MCP, the modified citrus pectin, is definitely one of my favorites, as well as apple pectin. I actually used a lot of apple pectin for detoxification of radioactive particles when I was growing up and later on. And also after I worked in Fukushima, which, yes, I was that crazy. I did go to Fukushima after the explosion, and I worked in the area just to understand what was going on and how much radioactive exposure we were actually getting, because the only thing that I've learned from Chernobyl is nobody tells you the truth. And you don't know until later on in your life. Maybe you're going to dig it out. And it only became apparent just how bad things were later when a lot of this information came out and became a little bit more public. So I did go to Japan to find out for myself, where we were at. And I was part of a research team there. And I've used apple pectin there as well, very specific one, a little bit more on a pharmaceutical grade to help me bind any radioactive particles that were coming in with food, which Japan actually did a really good job on controlling food stuff than Russians did in the beginning of Chernobyl affair.
Two things that I've heard you speak about in another form. So a lot of people now are very cognizant and maybe over kind of not say paranoid, but very concerned with if they have to get an X-ray or an MRI, not MRI, X-ray or CAT scan or some type of radiological test besides an MRI, their exposure to radiation. Do you have your clients do any type of prep before or after if they have to get some type of radiologic study? I have my own little program. I'm curious if you have some recommendations.
Yeah, for sure. We have done that. I mean, you don't really need binders in this specific situation unless you're taking contrast and things like that. We do support antioxidant systems, and that's like one of the ways to really try to protect the body. We have loading protocols before people go in, especially using things like glutathione, a little bit of binders, minerals. Sometimes we work specifically with methylation pathways for the person in question, because as you know, we all detox slightly different and support their organs. Again, depends which organ, is going to get scanned and things like that. Of course, the whole body gets, scanned in these situations, and it's a bit of a stress. Yes, we do have a post protocol as well. It just depends on how sensitive the person is to start with, and how many issues they already have, and how easily they're going to be able to handle radiation that is coming from, scanning or medical testing. I would say you get more radioactivity on the plane from cosmic rays than you do, with some of these X-rays and CAT scans, and we fly a lot, right? So you kind of have to think about that as well. So we have a protocol for flying, and we like taking that as well on the flights, especially long flights, intercontinental flights. You're smiling. What do you want to say?
No, I'm not, because that's something that a year or two ago, I didn't hear it. It was very rarely even brought up. And now more and more people who are not biohackers or health optimizers, whatever name you want to use, now more and more people have specific, either wearing some type of EMF protection clothing and or a mask, and then they have their own hydrogen and whatever and binded, whatever they happen to feel is like what's in their repertoire, and then they combine that with their jet lag protocol, and it's become like a complex thing where people are taking 5, 10. I've had patients that I will recommend doing certain things, and they want the TSA won't even let them on the plane with all this stuff, because they're like, what is this and what is this? It's been kind of like, but it's grown and grown and grown to something that people thought they were just paranoid, and now it's just kind of a run-of-the-mill type thing where a lot of people now are protecting themselves on the plane more than, like you said, almost anywhere else.
Well, I don't think people are paranoid. It's a legitimate concern. I don't know if you've seen the recent news. There was a Korean airline where a pilot actually he died and was from radiation exposure. And they were trying. I'll actually find that link and send it over to you. So it's not abnormal. You are removed from the earth field. You are high up. You will get more cosmic, rays coming through, and it could be problematic. And we also have to look at it as it's like the whole bucket of stressors. We have so many, right? Why not help the body, especially if you're flying a lot, right? To, deal with some of the, kind of those stressors. And it doesn't have to be super duper complex either. I mean, a lot of times we'll settle with definitely mineral and the hydrogen, or some kind of support for hydration, because you do get dehydrated, obviously, on those planes. We do use things like glutathione, or maybe precursors for the glutathione, to help with some of the antioxidants that needs to be used up during radiation exposure. Vitamin C, minerals. Those are kind of like a very basic ways to support the body. You don't have to come in with like a suit bag of like a bunch of products. What I do love for traveling on a plane is having a small PMF with me, because PMF have been shown to be very useful for microcirculation and for kind of adding electrons back into the system. There's evidence showing that it helps prevent some of the clumping of the red blood cells that are sticking together a little bit more when you're dehydrated and flying, and those compressed chambers as well. So that's something that I use quite a bit, and a lot of the people that I work with, because there's a couple of products on the market that are very easy to carry with you nowadays. Like, they used to be huge, and you needed to be connected to electrical circuit. Now they're powered by a battery, and it's all in one mat, right? Or whatever unit you're going to use. So I do like taking that with me. I'm one of those people, and it also helps with pains and aches, and kind of takes a lot of your lower back. So it's that's my definite component with travel on a plane.
Yeah, you've definitely given me your expertise on the benefits of PMF, and I used to be someone who just didn't find it useful. Now I've learned how to use it for myself in terms of inflammation and relaxation, and it's just something that people should definitely look into for their health. So I want to bring something else up that you were talking about, and I've heard conversations in terms of, yes, there's different saunas out there. There's sauna blankets. There's the TP saunas. There's the full $10,000 wood saunas you can put in your house. There's certain things that you want to look for, especially with the more expensive units, the wood units that you do and don't want in a sauna in terms of type of wood, checking in theory for EMF leakage. So what should people look for when they're buying a sauna, especially again, the wood sauna as opposed to like the blankets?
So for sure, low EMF. You already mentioned that. That's a big concern. You don't want to be sitting in the box, with a bunch of EMF, right? And that's became more of a kind of a industry standard. Of course, there's units that are, let's say, produced in China and other places where it's not as conscious, right? So, but a lot more companies are paying attention to EMF output. The second thing is the material of what it's made out of. As you mentioned, there's different wood. Pollock wood and hemlock is usually the two that are least toxic when you heat them up. So the traditional cedar saunas are not as advised for people who are sensitive because they can release oils when they're heated up. That's number one. Number two, where they're made. Like definitely having preference for Canadian or US made, and not having a lot of glues that are in the sauna. So you kind of have to look at that as well. Anytime you heat up a glue, you're going to be inhaling those VOCs. So you need to control for that. Those are my main points usually for the sauna, right? The rest of it is kind of add-ons of what are you going to have in there. Maybe you have colored lights, maybe you have music. I don't usually pay attention to that. The sauna blankets, there's a few on the market as well. You just kind of have to go with a trusted one that doesn't have the EMF output. A lot of people enjoy them because they're easy to use, and you can just put them away. And some people just don't really like sweating in the sheet, basically, right? So it makes them feel yucky, but it just depends on personal preference, space, and how portable do you want your unit. But there's also portable units like Relax Sauna and Cersage that also control the kind of quality materials that they're using that don't have anything toxic in them, low EMF. So those are good solutions for those that want something that's collapsible and is not going to take up the space, but don't want to sit in the bag basically and sweat in the bag and lay down. Some people don't want to lay down either. They want to be sitting up so they can read or write or not write, watch something, things like that, or meditate.
You can get any sauna you want at this point in any shape, size that you want. If you live in our apartment in Manhattan versus if you have a house in the burbs somewhere, you can find what's going to work best for you. But those are kind of the good suggestions. Look, EMF is probably one of the ones that kind of overflows all those different types of sauna. So I wanted to get your input because you probably have more intimate knowledge than almost anybody I know in terms of, again, like you mentioned, you're brought up in the Soviet Union. They have their own types of medicines and supplements that now have kind of come over here and become more and more popular. It started with some of the peptides like C-Max and C-Lank and cerebrolysine. Now the bioregulators, which I'm unfortunately or fortunately not going to try to pronounce some of these names. I know like everything from Apidolon to Ventfort to all the true Russian names that, again, I'm not going to embarrass myself or trying to pronounce it. So was this something that you were introduced when you were going through your detox? Is this something that you were introduced later in your health journey?
Good question. Yes, I got introduced to those early in my journey. It's something that was available for some of the experimental medicine. But at that point, it wasn't that experimental. They were used for radiation victims. We're talking about bioregulators right now. So because we do have a lot of different technologies that were used in Soviet Union. And an interesting thing that I wanted to mention, like why are those things available in Soviet Union, is you have to understand how things were kind of traditionally looked at by the government. Here we have an industry that's being kind of based on profit. You're not going to talk evil things about pharmaceuticals and things like that, but it's just completely different model. In Soviet Union, there was three things that they wanted to know, like how do you get people to space? How do you keep the army healthy? And how do you keep the population healthy in the cheapest way possible? So they were not discarding any type of research. They were not, not interested in energy medicine or, like Chinese medicine. They were studying everything, and everything was applicable and nothing was just thrown out, right? So that's why there's a lot of technologies that are based on electromagnetism that are coming from Russia. PMF was actually developed in Russia and perfected by Germans. There's a lot of bioelectrical devices, a lot of biofeedback devices, and bioregulators were also started in the 80s by Havinson for an army program too. Like it was sponsored by the army. They were trying to figure out how to keep the army healthy, and that spilled out to other places. And my family was using them. I was using them since I was, in my teens, basically, and I continued using them for quite a long time. Combination of different ones that was specifically for my issues. I briefly stopped because I went vegan and I went raw for a while, and I was a little bit vigilant about the sources. And of course, some of these products are animal based, and I did feel a decrease in my energy, and my thyroid issues kind of surfaced up after a couple of years of being vegan. But also there could have been other problems too, not getting enough protein and other things, and it definitely affected my cycle. So the first thing I did was bring back the bioregulators before I even started bringing back animal products into my normal diet. And that's something that I've been using for, over 20 years now. And it's widely available in the ex-Soviet countries, not just in Russia. And a lot of research has been done on peptides specifically and bioregulators since then. We have 40 years of research in this area. And it just continues on growing, right? And nowadays, I'm actually super excited to see how much interest there is in bioregulators, because it is affecting biology on DNA level. It's much smaller peptide chains, amino acid chains, so it can get into the cell and affect your DNA. So it's products that are, how I look at it, it's basically taking Chinese medicine, right, and glandular approach, and purifying it and going through a very scientific process of extracting what is actually was making the change when you were feeding people organs, right? And isolating it to those amino acid sequences, and then using them as medicine for people for rejuvenation, for for your longevity, or for correcting some of the issues that are basically on DNA level.
Yeah, that's that you kind of highlighted one for everybody listening out there that their bioregulators are similar in that they are groups of amino acids. They're usually a lot smaller. They almost all bioregulators work on the DNA. They're going into the cell. They're also replenishing what that specific organ needs, as opposed to that's not really specific what peptides do. They kind of are more, I don't say band-aids, but they're going to heal inflammation or build muscle or work on neuroplasticity or so on and so forth, to how the different peptides work. And what's great about the bioregulators too is that most of them, if you want, are oral, as opposed to you're not injecting yourself every day. They're usually much lower cost than some of the peptides that are out there. And I think you've been using them a lot longer. I've seen quicker improvement and tangible improvement. I've had people take certain peptides like a MOTS-c or like a thymosin alpha 1. They're like, okay, I feel better, but I don't. It's not like wow. But I've had people take bioregulators and they're like, so my libido is better, or my energy is better, or we do lab tests and their stomach or their liver is better, or whatever. And it's just so A to B with some of the bioregulators. It's something that I've jumped into later than some, and I'm just really, really impressed by how effective and also, like you said, simple in how they work, but they're just very effective in what they do. And you only have to take them for a couple months, if that long sometimes.
Yeah, and the safety profile too, right? A super high safety profile too. It's there's very little side effects. Like I don't actually have seen anybody have side effects from taking bioregulators. And you take in small amounts, and like you said, you don't have to go on a very long courses too. There's you do a first course kind of like loading doses, and then you do a pulsing methods where you just come in and do like 10 days once a month to kind of maintain. And there's lots of different ways you can cycle through protocols depending on what you're working on, supporting different organ systems. Of course, one of the biggest ones, like you said, the libido, supporting female and male hormones, supporting thyroid, supporting circulation, supporting your pineal gland. Those are like the main ones that definitely get a lot of attention, especially now with so many issues in reproductive areas. We have seen clients do much better with their fertility once they started on bioregulators. And it's part of now any type of fertility pre-treatment, where we work with a couple of fertility doctors where we use bioregulators to help them get a much better quality eggs, even if they're going to do an IVF, let's say, right? You still get a better source material to work with, and a healthier fetus.
I'm hoping I've started with in that same vein, that with my fertility patients, because there's just not a great, besides just loading up on hormones and hormones and hormones. And the couple I've done it, I've just seen really good results. And I'm also curious, because it does work on the epigenetics part of your cells. Have you been testing anything like biological age testing with any patients that have done the bioregulators and seen any difference noted, or not yet? Or
it's so hard to say, because we're not just doing them in a vacuum. Like I've never done let's just do bioregulators, right? So I can't say it's like bioregulators is the way. And I know there's Bill Lawrence is doing a whole study right now, like looking at longevity markers, but it's the same way. I mean, none of the people that I know that are in the study are actually just doing bioregulators. They're doing all sorts of other stuff. So it's hard to say directly. I would say, it's definitely, we see people on the protocols have better biomarkers, and in general, and definitely better tests as far as biological age. But again, it's never in a vacuum. So it's hard for me to say it's like, yes, this is the way, right? But it makes sense that you would be rejuvenating DNA. You will have better biological age in general, right? But again, hard to say. Never in a vacuum. There's so many things that usually happens for these individuals.
Yeah, that's with the clients that both of us deal with. Yeah, it's never just one thing. It's a bucket of multiple things in a stack and a pathway. So one thing you didn't mention is you are definitely involved in two things. You mentioned part of it is that you're involved in several supplement companies, and you were in it before it was everybody and their mother was involved in a supplement company, and you've seen the growth there. And then also you're an advisor like you said, on the business side to a lot of different companies that are out there. So things went from kind of on the wellness and health optimization kind of community went from kind of on the sidelines to now it's mainstream. It's everywhere. It's Tony Robbins. It's everybody has a longevity brand at this point. So in terms of where supplements are and where they're going, where do you? I mean, I've become a lot more specific, a lot more I don't say high tech, but I know the company that you work with just has, in terms of the brain supplements and the nutrition products and everything else. There's a lot of research going on. It's not you say, okay, I'm going to take from this two little things in the kitchen and put them together and just sell it as a product. So, how is the supplement market, and how high end it's come to now? Where do you see it now, and where do you see it going in the future? Very simple, easy question right there.
Yeah, it's an easy question. Supplement industry is still wild west. Let's just be clear about it. There's a lot out there, and a lot of it not really great quality. I mean, we do have an amazing team down in Eastern Europe in a university where everything is tested. And when we're putting together formulas for one of the companies I'm involved with is BioOptimizers, is everything gets tested, like every ingredient. And you'd be surprised how few ingredients pass the test for bioavailability. Like out of 100 sources, you might have one that actually passes the test. And then the problem is to get enough of that, right? So they always run eventually into supply. And as you grow and the company grows, I think one of the things that happens with a lot of companies as the product sells and, it becomes popular, how do you maintain the quality of the ingredients that are coming in? And that's where rigorous testing, really is important. And honestly, when the company started, we didn't have anything like that. It's just like it was putting it together 20 years ago in your kitchen, honestly. It was like, oh, let's just put all of this together. Oh, look at this. It works, right? It's like we were putting it for ourselves together. Just literally put the most expensive protease-based enzymes into a product, and that's how Masszymes got created. And when the company that was putting it together for us, I said, hey, we can do this and this and this to make it cheaper. We said we don't want it cheaper. we want all of the best stuff in it. They're like, well, we don't see how you're going to sell it. And that's true. We were not able to sell it through retail market. So it had to be, business to consumer for quite a long time before we even got into retail. And that's kind of how you have to take a look at this too, is like the size of the company matters, whether you're going to go through retail right away and how the margins are done. There's so many ways to make a product less expensive but more affordable at the on the shelf of a store. So it's a good question. Where do I see it going? I definitely see more by individualization, more people paying attention to sourcing. I can see that there's going to be more products that are by individualized, put together based on testing. It's like I see a lot of companies like we're doing that with one of the brain products, Natopia, where the products are changing every month with you, depending on your answers, on the questionnaire, basically to try to figure out how to shift it. Because especially with the brain and your genesis happens here, like your brain changes, especially month to month for women, especially, I would say. So that process already there of bioindividualization, I think a lot more testing is happening for companies that do have the finances to do so, to make sure the ingredients are pure and they're active. Overall, I see a better outlook. I just don't know how it's going to trickle down to the mass market, to other places where you can get products for less expensive, let's say. I'm not saying Costco and things like that, but eventually that's where it might get going. And the other thing that happens, a lot of company gets bought out, right? How many do we know that got bought out, right? Like, look what happened to Atrium, who bought it out, right? I'm not gonna say who bought it out. You might stop using all those products that owned by Atrium brand. So what happens once they get bought? I mean, that's the other question that I wonder about, especially if they get bought by a pharmaceutical company. I mean, that's something to be aware of as a consumer, right? Like, who owns the company that you might be familiar with that got sold? For example, we're not talking supplements right now, but like I used to love a chocolate called Lily's chocolate, right? So this sugar-free one got sold to a big company. Not going to name names. Completely changed. Not the same product. That doesn't have the same effect, and definitely is not something that I would put into my body. So that happens a lot too. So you kind of have to track those trends and see if the company is staying true, even if it's sold, right? Maybe the same owners are staying to quality control, so you kind of have to look at those factors, I think, especially if you're really having experience with the company, all of a sudden it changes. You have to take a look at and make sure that it hasn't been sold.
Yeah, exactly. A lot of these big, like I said, big pharmaceutical or big corporations are want to get into the wellness space without having to do the legwork. And yeah, they're just buying companies, and some they're keeping the same, and some they're altering formulations or price. Or I mean, I know one went from something as simple as from going from methylcobalamin to cyanocobalamin, which we know is more toxic and less expensive, but also not as good for really helpful for people to be using. And yeah, you do definitely got to be aware. And it's in a lot of ways, it's getting worse, not better. But that's, yeah, you said, it's still buyer beware, but there are still some really good brands out there. Speak with people who know where the good brands are. And then just be careful of, sometimes the bigger brands are little ones that may not be as good for you. So Bioptimizers has one of the most, I'll say, the interesting way of dealing with nootropics and the brain. That's almost, I know with my clientele, it's probably about 40% of my patients are always, okay, how can I optimize my brain? How can I be more focused? I don't want to be on Adderall. And then you guys have the product Natopia that you can, like you said, it's not the same thing every month. It's okay, I'm going to take my quiz and figure out exactly what's the best fit for me. And you guys, I think, have patented several different components of that's different than anything else on the market. Where, again, I always love to know, for yourself or for your clientele, what are the top 2 or 3 things that you're recommending to them now in terms of, let's call it brain optimization, not for somebody who's dealing with a neurodegenerative issue? Is it all supplement based? Or again, I know you love the technology, things like hyperbaric or red light. Is it all of the above kind of combined into one thing in terms of how people should be looking in terms of brain optimization?
Okay, I mean that's such a huge topic, right? Brain optimization. Again, this could be so many
Quick high
variants.
yield, quick high yield. Yes.
Yeah, there's so many variants in there. It was like, what are
So
you using
even
your brain
nootropics,
for,
yeah.
right? I mean, yeah, nootropics is such a like huge conversation because especially after that movie Limitless came out, right? Everybody wants the NZT. Actually, Mark, who is the formulator for Notopia, he had a product called NZT when it came out because everybody was looking for it and online. You know, how do I
Take
get that?
advantage of the market. Take advantage of the market. Good business. Good business.
And I mean, Nootropics is definitely a really fun game. I'll tell you that. And I remember the first time I started using Notopia products before the Bioptimizers even acquired Notopia from Mark was I was a little skeptical because I really like my brain state the way it is, and I don't want to mess with it. So like I'm very careful with the kind of substances that I take, and I actually had the box of nootropics sitting on my shelf for quite a while, and finally I tried it, and I was very pleasantly surprised of how well it worked. Because in the past I've used other formulations, I'm not going to say which ones, and they didn't really work for me. And key factor was is because a lot of times they had a lot of stimulants in there. But because of this specific, the way the product is designed, the way the cofactoring is made, the you can take out by request stimulants completely out of the formulation and kind of work specifically with your goals and in your physiology. And that was a really great tool. And for a first year, I was using them a lot. And I was almost, if my box wasn't coming on time, it was like, where's my stuff? I need to get stuff done. But what we've noticed over time, as people were using the nootropics, especially the ones from Notopia, and it's not great for the business, but they were starting using it less and less, the same as myself. But you maintain the same energy level and functionality. It's almost like there was a neurogenesis that was happening, and maybe some of the places where you needed amino acids in your brain or some of the pathways that were not quite well functioning before all of a sudden started working better. So you maintain the same level of function but didn't need it. And that really is like where you want it at the end of the day. So nowadays, nootropics for me personally and a lot of my clients are just being used. And okay, I need to get stuff done because I have a paper due or something else is happening. So you can get how we call it nuded up, nuded to the max. That's one of the expressions one of my clients uses. Where you can get a lot of stuff done. But then you have to understand anytime you're pushing your brain in that way, and it's a disease of our lifetime here. Like the success is so preached, right? We all want to get massive amounts of stuff done. You have to understand that you're spending energy currency, right? And it can bite you in the butt somewhere, down the line, basically. And you really need to understand that there is another side of it, right? You're pushing, but you have to make sure that you're also really, really working with your more, recovery processes, right? Reset, digest, was it rest and digest, right? And that's something that gets thrown out of equation for so many people, and it's so important for brain optimization and function. Honestly, like if I speak to our high-end clients who are using all the products and all the supplements, nootropics and things like that, and they are, let's say, having a physiological issue, and we started breaking it down, and I asked them, well, okay, I understand you're under a lot of stress and getting a lot of stuff done, but are you doing your morning practice, which is usually breath work, meditation, or are you doing your evening practice to shift gears? And that's the first thing that goes out of the window. As soon as you're stressed, for some reason, recovery, rest goes out of the window. And that's the thing you need the most. And that's the thing you need the most for brain optimization. The reason why we're so struggling, right? And the reason why foggy, as one of the biggest reasons, is because we are overspending those energy currency. We are really pushing our bodies to the max, and we're not letting ourselves recover. And it's something that's part of culture, obviously, right? Especially in the places like you live in New York, everybody's just go, 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 right? I moved out to a place that's much quieter and slower, specifically because I saw myself doing that. And I was like, okay, I need to create a situation for myself where I'm more prone to doing these recovery practices for myself and prioritize them. And when we work with clients, that's not the nootropics that we prioritize. It's not the the fancy neurofeedback that we use. We use a lot of fancy neurofeedback. We can talk about that in a minute. But it's the recovery that gets really first attention and get stressed by myself with them, and making sure that that is such a core of their lifestyle that they can't stop it when they are under resourced, right? Because that's again the first thing that goes out in the window, and it's the thing that you need the most. So making sure that you're working with your vagal tone and making sure that you're able to go from fight or flight to rest and digest. And nervous system regulation is key in brain optimization and performance. So once you find what those things are for you specifically, and a lot of times it's simple things, you don't need to have a bunch of biohacks for that. It's breath work. It's simply breathing, simply being, shutting down your computer early enough, like having time to recover. It's pleasurable activities too, like we don't play enough. We really don't play enough. And I look sometimes at the children's books because, of course, I have a child that I want to optimize his brain functions. And, the healthy brain platter, how they're called, has play in it. Kids have to play. But guess what? Adults have to play too. We have to have, yeah, exactly. We have to have those pleasurable activities. The oxytocin is like the most important hormone. It is on top of the chain of all the other hormone cascade. So the more oxytocin you create for yourself, which is hugging, which is, playing with your dog, which is looking at your child's eyes and playing with your child, right? It's always, sex. It's a big one too. It's like, it's a tool for oxytocin generation. So those are things that we talk a lot with clients, and how to create more of that. And in type A personalities that are go, 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 that's the thing that goes just out of the window like that. Or there is the other side of it where it's sex, drugs, and rock and roll, right? So where like they really want to play, but they don't play safely, and they don't do it in a way that is good for their brain and their bodies, right? Or is the other expression, how I usually say, it's like we've lost the skill to chill. So the way we're chilling now.
I may steal that one. Yes, yes.
Okay, right?
Perfect, yes.
Take it. It's yours. But the skill to chill is like super important, like how a lot of women, especially moms, chill out nowadays. By the time they're done with their work day, like you're very married to an amazing woman who is a plastic surgeon, and exactly. And you guys have a small child, like how stretched are you, right? Like it's a lot running a practice.
Ironically, today she was up at 2 a.m. and didn't want to go back to bed. Yeah, so it was. But it's all good. Yeah, but definitely the foundational stuff is so much more important than the things that are $10,000. The $10,000 toys are fun to play with, but if you don't have the foundation, everything just falls apart. Like sleep and breath work and mindset, all that stuff's so important. Now you mentioned neurofeedback, and that again, that's something that's kind of was on the back burner for a lot of people, and now is getting more and more publicity. So how do you use it for your patients, and why are you so excited about it now?
I mean, I've been using neurofeedback since probably 2006 or 2007. My first introduction was through a company called Brain State. It's called something else now. Ligordes was one of the kind of like big names at that time. So was using that practice, and then kind of delving into all sorts of different expressions of neurofeedback. So neurofeedback, the way we use it nowadays, especially, it can be done in several ways. Working with a practitioner, coming to sessions once or twice a day, sometimes depending on the program, having sessions anywhere from 20 to 40 sessions that will generate a result. It's usually some kind of process where there's a brain mapping done to take a look at like how your brain is functioning, where there might be some deficiencies, where you're not working as well, and then creating a program to retrain the patterns and retrain your kind of neural pathways. And that can be different programming. There's so many different ones on the market right now, and it's kind of difficult to sift through those. There's companies that can send you a device home, like NeuroOptimal, and you can train at home after you've been brain mapped. There's devices like Sense.ai that is at home unit. And I actually have one of those and I've been playing with that one. There's a couple more that I just found today, and I'm actually going to try them out that you can be training at home, but you're just following a program and you have a headset that's connected, to through the skin, so you can read the brainwaves. Or, like I said, you can be working with practitioner. Practitioner is super important because a lot of people that are not well trained in the neurofeedback can buy an equipment sometimes, and they'll do the brain map and then they'll let the computer spit out a protocol, and that's what somebody will follow. I find that those are the sessions that won't be as effective as somebody who's really specifically been trained in neurofeedback, who's got the credentials, who maybe is a therapist, who got an interest in neurofeedback. And those people are more able to understand you and your problems and how you are functioning in the world, and then take what the computer is saying and modify the programming. And that's usually yields much better results. And that can be anything from dealing with PTSD to anxiety to post-COVID. It's actually been used quite a bit as well for kids with ADD and ADHD. We've used it with our kid because he was having some anger issues that were coming up here and there, and he was lighting up in some of his parts of the brain that was overactive, and we used neurofeedback to help him with that, and that worked like really well, like magic, basically. There is new generation neurofeedback, something called Neurogen. That's very interesting to me, and we're trying this out right now. And there is another way of intensive neurofeedback. So intensive neurofeedback sessions usually go between 5 to 7 days. You are not doing anything else. You're in a chamber. There's places like BioCybernet and 40 Years of Zen. And BioCybernet is local here. And, I'm really familiar with that program and 40 Years of Zen. And there's other people like Dr. Drew Pearson who has their own facility and their own program. And during that time, you're basically dedicating 5 to 7 days of working very deeply with your neural patterns and with your brain waves. And there is also a therapy component there as well. And they're highly expensive. They can be anywhere between $15,000 to $40,000, but it's a major upgrade. And we've seen people who were in severe trauma coming out completely different people. My husband actually worked for BioCybernet Institute, and he told me stories that was just like unbelievable of what he's seen over there in just 1 week. And the cool thing about these type of technology, neurofeedback sessions is wherever you end up, let's say you've gained a certain level of alpha brainwave pattern, if you come back a year later, you come back to the same level. You don't drop down. So it's not something that's temporary. It's not something that's going to go away. It's definitely a long-lasting change that changes the brain. And people experience anything from increase in emotional intelligence to increase in creativity, productivity. We just had the whole, our executive suite BioOptimizers here for a week of very extensive neurofeedback, well, like 5 days, and it was something. Definitely. So very interesting.
I can imagine with you guys, yes. That's what I had brain mapping done by somebody in California, and it was like he was a mind reader. He's like, looked at my scan. He's like, you had this and you had that, and you haven't been sleeping. And it was right when we were getting ready for the pregnant. I'm like, he's like, how do you know? I'm like, he's like, you have this and this and this, and I'm like, it's so impressive. And I did some basic things and I got better. And then so that I think it is that proves when somebody could tell me something without me giving them any information or very little, I know there's usually some validity to it. And I've just seen more and more of it. And now, the older home neuro feedback units have almost all fizzled out. Most of them have just been not good at all. This generation, you mentioned the Sense.ai and a couple the Neurosen, those have seen that more potential to be really effective, where patients can get benefit and not set themselves back 3 steps. That's what I was saying there. Oh, well, I did this. I felt worse. I had to go to so-and-so to fix what I did wrong. And I think this is hopefully the next generation to make them better.
Yeah, and that's also what I said to you earlier. It's like it's really important also not just the program. It's important to figure out what kind of program you're going to use and what are they using, but also really important, who is the practitioner, right? So they might have had set themselves back because it could have been somebody that's not really trained in this and just has bought the equipment and doing neurofeedback sessions. It's like, one of those things. It's important to know who you go into. A funny story I want to tell you about, like people knowing, looking at the brain waves of what you've done. The first time I've done BioCybernet, Dr. Hart was sitting with me and looked at my brain wave map, and he's not reading actually brain scan is very different. It's actually looking at your alpha and gamma, like there's like a whole long sheet of all the all the frequencies like that your brain was making. And he looks at it and he goes like, "Have you ever been dead before?" And I was like, "What?" He was like, "How can you tell that?" And he was like, "Yeah, well, there's this specific pattern in the brain, that's when people had near death experience that changes your brain, and this is what we see." So things like that, right? It's very interesting that what can you actually tell by brain mapping somebody.
It's cool and a little scary all at the same time. It's like a good party trick if you're good at it. So I could talk to you all day. I mean, in terms of getting all this great tidbits and information, we're running near the end of the podcast here. So let everybody know where they can find you, where you have information about yourself and what you offer and some of the products you represent. So how can they find you online and hear more from you?
Well, you can't really find me online that much. I spend a lot of my time. It's not about private. It's just I have a lot of like stuff to do, and I don't have a lot of stuff, lot of time to spend time online. Right? Just like you said, I do a lot of different things, and I'd rather be in a field than online. So I do sometimes come out on podcasts with people I actually love to talk to, like yourself. And I am sometimes on Instagram, and it's just Katrine Walensky. And I do have a website that has nothing on it, just because I've never actually needed to put anything on there. The company that I work with is and Formulate is Biooptimizers, biooptimizers.com. There's a lot of information on there. We have a lot of YouTube videos that, I actually did a bunch of recipe things over there, and we have a nutrition course. So it's just different stuff through Biooptimizers if you wanted to learn a little bit more. But that's pretty much it. I'm not much of an online person. I'm more like hands-on.
I looked at the website trying to get some info on you, and I'm like, "There's nothing here." It's like I just go back to all their Clubhouse talks. Some of those Clubhouse talks started coming back in my head from like 3 or 4 years ago now. But again, thanks for coming on. She definitely is an expert on detox and PMF, and we didn't even get into like stem cells and V cells. So definitely, if you ever hear her giving a lecture or speaking on one of the summits, definitely tune into her lectures. Thanks again for coming on. Thanks for tuning in to the Life Optimized podcast, where you learn how to optimize life, health, brain, and your sports. And stay tuned for our next podcast coming out soon. See you guys soon. Later.